Hi everybody, Ian Bremmer here, and instead of your world of 60 seconds, the Middle East peace plan just dropped. I've actually read it over the weekend, talked to all the principals, thought I would share with you some of my views about it. First of all, it is a significant departure in American diplomacy vis-a-vis Israel and Palestine. This is not the same as earlier peace plans. And one big reason for that is that the realities of geopolitics in the Middle East have changed. Today, Israel-Palestine is not a particularly divisive issue of high priority among most of the Arab world. When you ask them what are the things they most worry about, they say Iran, they say Al-Qaeda and ISIS, they say domestic political development, they say Yemen and Syria and Iraq and Libya, and Israel-Palestine isn't on the top 5, in some cases not even the top 10, which means that the level of urgency to get this actually fixed is a lot lower than it used to be. Second point is that the position of the Palestinians on the ground is a lot weaker than it used to be. The fact is that they have less territory. There's been expansion of Israeli settlements despite international outcry against it. The Israelis no longer need Palestinian labor the way they used to. They have an iron dome around Israel, provided with American military support that stops the Palestinians from being able to threaten the Israelis as much with missiles coming over. They have strong surveillance that makes it really hard for the Palestinians to engage in asymmetric warfare against Israel. And all of that means that the Palestinians are, frankly, in a much worse position today than they were 5, 10, or 20 years ago. The Trump administration policy reflects that. I mean, over the course of the last years, we've had the Trump administration unilaterally recognize Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, and move the U.S. embassy there, despite lots of opposition from the international community. And the impact of that was not a hell of a lot. They moved on. Same thing with Trump recognizing the Golan Heights as part of Israel. And this is another piece of that strategy. This is the United States negotiating with the Israelis, with both Netanyahu and with Benny Gantz, both of whom are running for the presidency, for the premiership in Israel in upcoming elections, third time around. The first two have been inconclusive. And the Palestinians have been no part of it at all. So the actual deal that is being offered to the Palestinians is a pretty weak deal, and it's more aligned with Israeli interests. And that no surprise, that's why Netanyahu and Gantz both accepted it, than previous deals have been. I'll get into that in a second, but I think one thing that's important to recognize is that the Trump administration does have a two-state solution here. It is the first time that Netanyahu has been willing to publicly accept a two-state solution. There's a Palestinian state, there's a capital in East Jerusalem, and the Palestinians have sovereignty over it. That combined with an offer of billions of dollars of investment over 10 years, if the Palestinians are prepared to commit and adhere to the deal, are fairly significant upsides given how weak the Palestinian position presently is. Having said that, there are big non-starters for the Palestinians and things that make this deal a lot weaker than it used to be. A few of them, number one, the capital in Jerusalem is not within the secured boundaries, which is what they had been offered in previous deals. It's actually outside core Jerusalem in the east, would need to be built up. Doesn't include control of key holy sites. Also, although it does provide access, that would be a big deal. The total amount of land they get is about 70% of the West Bank, compared to 95% that was being offered under the Clinton deal, for example. They're obviously not going to like that either, but in part that's because lots of Israeli settlements have been built over the last 20 years, and the Israelis are getting the right to keep those settlements. Nobody believes that they would possibly move them. You also have a reality that right of return is being limited, Palestinians not being allowed to return to Israel, and the Israelis having a say over right of return even to the Palestinian territories. And then finally, perhaps the biggest non-starter, at least for this Palestinian government, is that they have to renounce state violence against Israel. They have to recognize Israel as being the state of the Jewish homeland for the Jewish people. And Hamas, I mean, that either means Hamas has to go or they have to fundamentally subvert their core principles. They're the government of Gaza. They're not about to do that. So for all of those reasons, this is a non-starter for the Palestinian government as it exists today. And to be fair, the Americans, the Israelis, and the Arabs all know that. So they're not expecting that the Palestinians are about to engage in negotiations. But here's where it gets interesting. The Trump administration has not only gotten support from Gantz and Netanyahu, both of whom are running against each other in upcoming Israeli elections. And that's actually important because it shows that they're putting politics aside and they're aligning their national security interests, as they have, for example, when Netanyahu bombed Iranian sites in Syria, and he briefed fully Gantz on it, and they both came together and said this was the right thing to do. That's an interesting point. The Israelis are not, they don't find a lot of these national security issues as controversial internally, domestic politics they used to be. But also, I've spoken with a lot of Arab leaders over the past few days, and most of them are pretty strongly in favor of the deal and say that the Palestinians and Israelis should negotiate on the back of this deal immediately. Now, when the Palestinians don't do that, and the Arabs are supporting it, and the Israelis are supporting it, and a number of the Europeans are supporting it, and the Americans are supporting it, where does that leave the Palestinians? I mean, first of all, pretty screwed, because the Americans will immediately recognize the settlements in the West Bank that the Israelis have occupied as legitimate and annexed and part of Israeli territory. So in other words, the U.S. is continuing to offer both carrots but also serious sticks here. Before, it's been mostly about carrot. But also, if the Palestinians stay out of the process of normalization of relations between Israel and the Arab states will continue. And the United States is by no means an honest broker between the U.S. and Palestine, but they're a serious honest broker between the Israelis and the Gulf states, between the Arab states. And of course, that's the first place Trump traveled when he was president, was first to Saudi Arabia, then to Israel. So that's what they see here, is that there's a bigger geopolitical prize. And if you want to get Israeli-Palestinian peace at some point, they believe it's a lot easier to do that from a position of strength when everyone else in the region already supports you and the Palestinians have no one. That, of course, could lead to a third intifada. It could lead to a lot more radicalism, could lead to even more depredation for the Palestinians, but that was the direction they were already heading. So I can't say this is a good news story in the sense that what's happened between the Israelis and the Palestinians has been a bad news story for a lot of people for a long time, and that is potentially where we're still going to go. But the politics and the geopolitics of the Middle East are changing, and I do think that this peace initiative does reflect that. That's something that's otherwise going to be lost, I think, in all the early analysis that comes out here. So that's my view here, and I hope you found this worthwhile, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you all again next week when we'll go back to 60 Seconds.